Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS Legal Hotline lawyer. And this is the first episode in a new Legal Hotline series entitled There's a Form for That. And I want to introduce to you my friend Camden Schutte. Camden?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Camden Schutte, the designated broker for Coldwell Banker 360 team and 360 Property Management on Whidbey Island and Fidalgo Island.
And giving credit where credit's due, and Camden gets all the credit because this series was Camden's idea. And Camden is the designated broker for a large firm, oversees a lot of transactions. And he said, one of the things that I realized supervising all these transactions is that there are a lot of brokers in the industry who don't know there's a form for that. Whatever that might be from time to time, brokers seem to not necessarily know the forms well enough to know that for many of the individualized, specialized issues you deal with, there is a form catered to that purpose. And so in this series, we're going to talk about forms that you may not use often. We're also going to talk about some forms that you do use often, but you may not realize the full utilization of that form. So let's start with a form that everybody uses all the time, and that is Form 35, the inspection contingency. But Camden, let's pretend like I am the buyer broker writing an offer for property that is serviced by a septic system, has on-site sewage system, a septic system. I'm representing a buyer who wants to have a home inspection, and they also want to check out that septic system. As a buyer broker, I want to be as efficient as possible with my use of the forms, so I am going to use Form 35 only. I'm gonna fill it out so that my buyer can do a home inspection. And looking at that first paragraph of Form 35, it is a robust inspection that the buyer can do. They can inspect almost everything about the seller's property.
Yep.
My buyer does also want to inspect that septic system, so I mark the box for sewer scope. And I tell my buyer, now you can inspect the home and you can inspect the septic. Am I right?
No. And it comes back to knowing the difference between a sewer, what the property is connected to. Is it connected to a sewer or is it connected to an on-site sewage system, a septic? And that's the difference. If it's connected to an on-site sewage system, there's a form for that, and that's the 22S, the septic system addendum. If it's connected to a sewer, like public sewer, that type of thing, absolutely you can do it in a 35. But for an on-site sewage system, you need another form, and that's the 22S.
Okay. And the Form 35, if you forget this, the Form 35 even directs you and your buyer to that conclusion. Paragraph 9 of Form 35 says, stop. If what you have is a septic system or an on-site sewage system, you need to use a different form for that inspection. So let's turn the tables a little bit here, or let's keep me as a buyer broker. Now you're the listing broker.
Yep.
You've received my offer. You're selling property you're helping the seller sell property that has a septic system. You receive my offer with the Form 35 sewer scope marked. What do?
I need to have a conversation with the seller, because my expectation or my understanding is that what I'm thinking is you're hoping to be able to inspect the septic system by checking that box, but you don't understand which form to use. So I need to have a conversation with the seller, let them know the pros and cons. There's different 22S's for different areas, for different municipalities, counties. In Island County, where I'm at, it's required that the seller has the septic inspected within 12 months of the sale. So I need to have a conversation with my seller so they know what requirement they may have and what options the buyer have. And ultimately we want to all get on the same page. So that could mean countering with the 22S and removing that check on the Form 35.
Okay, so what you just said, Camden, is that even if the buyer broker has used the wrong form, doesn't include a septic contingency addendum at all, what you're saying is that it's possible that local ordinance is going to require the seller to take action with respect to that septic system, even if the buyer hasn't asked for it.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's why it's so important to know where you're working and not work outside of your knowledge and your area of expertise, because every area is different.
Okay. So that's one component of it. What about how do you feel about the idea that as the listing broker may be able to out-clever the buyer broker, right? The buyer thinks they're going to have a contingency, but the listing broker knows you don't have a contingency for the septic system because you haven't asked for one, and we don't have a sewer, so there is no sewer scope, even though you've got permission for a sewer scope. What about that?
In that scenario, if they really want that septic inspection, I would imagine that they'll just terminate based off of the 35 because you're still in your inspection period, and then come back and renegotiate.
Yeah. So that's something you would also discuss with your seller in
Absolutely.
conversation.
Absolutely.
Right. So seller, chances are good that this buyer is at least knows enough to have told their broker, I want an inspection of the system that's providing the sewage disposal. Buyer broker got the wrong form, but the buyer knows that they want that inspected. So if their buyer broker didn't put them in a place to get the property inspected, the septic system inspected, chances are they're going to use their inspection contingency to terminate the transaction.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And whether it be with the seller or with the buyer broker, ultimately it all comes back to communication. We all have the goal in mind to get this property closed, buyer a new home, seller sell their home. So communicate.
Communicate. Exactly. And please know, the takeaway from this episode is, if you have a septic system, on-site sewage disposal system, 435 sewer scope does not get the buyer's inspection of that septic system. You have to include a separate septic contingency addendum, whether it's Form 22S or a localized septic contingency addendum, which would be Form 22S- and then followed by some further designation associated with your county.
Yep. If you want to get it done, there's a form for that.
If you have a question on this topic or any other, please send a question to me by visiting warealtor.org and following the links to the legal hotline. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.